Welcome to Story Planet, where we bring you relaxing and peaceful tales to help you unwind. Tonight's story is The Village Gathering. So, get comfortable, let go of the day, and allow yourself to drift into the heart of a quiet village where life moves gently and the beauty of nature and community come together in perfect harmony. Now, let's begin. In a small, tranquil village, nestled between lush green hills and wide open meadows, the villagers lived in peaceful harmony with the rhythms of nature. The village, called Maplewood, was home to just a few hundred souls who embraced the simple rhythms of their days. Time here was not hurried. It was soft and slow, just like the rolling clouds that drifted across the bright sky, or the way the sun dipped gently below the horizon each evening. Life in Maplewood had its routines, but none more cherished than the monthly gathering in the village square. It was an event that everyone looked forward to. Every first Saturday of the month, when the day was nearing its end, and the sky painted itself in soft hues of pink and lavender, the villagers came together in the square. There was no rush, no formal announcement, and no need for reminders. They simply knew. It was a tradition woven into the fabric of their lives, like the threads of a warm, well-worn blanket. In the heart of the square stood the ancient oak tree, its sprawling branches stretching wide like arms, offering shelter. Underneath this great tree, wooden tables were set up, covered in embroidered linens and small bouquets of wildflowers. The air was always fresh with the sense of food brought from the villagers' kitchens: warm bread, fresh cheeses, pies made from the fruit trees in their gardens, and pitchers filled with herbal teas or lemonade. The scene was never chaotic, never hurried. There was a peaceful rhythm to the way everyone moved, spoke, and prepared for the evening ahead. One of the village's beloved figures was an elderly woman named Brenda. She had lived in Maplewood all her life and had watched the village grow and change. Her hair, now silver like moonlight, was always tied in a neat bun, and her eyes still twinkled with the same brightness they had in her youth. Brenda's garden was known across the village for its vibrant herbs and flowers, and she always brought something special from it to the gathering. On this particular evening, she arrived with a basket of rosemary bread and jars of golden honey from her beehives. "Evening, Brenda," called out Mary, the baker's wife, as she set up her platter of freshly baked cinnamon rolls. The warm, sweet scent drifted through the air, making everyone's mouths water. "Good evening, Mary," Brenda replied, her voice soft but filled with warmth. "Those rolls of yours will be gone before the sun sets. I'm sure of it." Mary smiled, patting her apron. "Well, let's hope so. I've baked enough to feed an army." The two women chuckled as they arranged their offerings on the tables, chatting quietly as the evening settled around them. More villagers began to arrive, moving leisurely with dishes in hand. The square was filling, but there was no rush, no urgency, only the soft murmur of conversation and the clinking of plates as people greeted one another. Across the square, near the base of the oak tree, stood Thomas, the village blacksmith. Though he was known for his strength and broad shoulders, Thomas had the gentlest of hearts. His presence was steady, his demeanor calm. Tonight, he brought with him a jug of elderberry wine he had brewed himself. He poured a cup and handed it to Peter, the village tailor, who was known for his impeccable craftsmanship and sharp eye for detail. "Thank you, Thomas," Peter said, accepting the drink with a nod. He was dressed, as always, in fine handmade clothes that gave him an air of quiet elegance. Despite his slender frame, Peter was a man of deep thought and careful words. Thomas smiled softly in return, taking a sip from his own cup. The two men didn't need to speak much. Their quiet companionship was enough, and they stood side by side, watching as the villagers slowly gathered. At the edge of the square sat Clara, a retired schoolteacher who had moved to Maplewood only a few years ago. She had come seeking the slower pace of village life, having grown tired of the busy town where she had spent most of her years. Clara was a woman of quiet grace, with a gentle spirit that immediately put others at ease. She carried with her a small notebook in which she would sometimes jot down thoughts or observations, capturing the beauty of the simple life she now lived. But tonight, her notebook remained closed as she sat back, taking in the peaceful atmosphere. As the sky shifted from pink to a deepening blue, the final figure arrived. Michael, the village postman. Michael was known for his cheerful demeanor and his knack for conversation. He always had a smile on his face and something kind to say. This evening, he brought with him a basket of freshly picked apples, their red skins glowing in the fading light. "Good evening, Brenda," Michael said warmly as he approached the table where she stood. "I brought the first apples of the season. Thought you might like a few." Brenda smiled, her heart swelling with the familiar comfort of these small acts of kindness. "Your apples are always the best, Michael. I'll take a couple, thank you." The village gathering had reached its gentle peak. The square was now filled with the soft hum of voices, the clinking of glasses, and the quiet laughter of children as they ran barefoot beneath the oak tree. The air was alive with the warmth of shared stories and the sense of belonging that only a close-knit community could bring. The stars began to twinkle overhead, small and soft, like the lanterns that had been hung in the branches of the tree. At one end of the square, sitting beneath the oak's wide canopy, was Samuel, the village's storyteller. He was an old man with silver hair and a face lined with years of wisdom. Samuel had lived in Maplewood longer than most, and his stories had become a cherished part of the monthly gatherings. His voice was low and smooth, drawing people in as he spun tales of the village's past, stories filled with gentle humor and quiet lessons about life. "Gather round, children," Samuel said, his voice carrying softly over the square. "It's time for a story." The children, always eager for one of Samuel's tales, gathered close, sitting at his feet with wide eyes and quiet anticipation. The adults, too, found themselves drawn in, their conversation slowing as they turned to listen. Samuel's voice was like a lullaby, soft and steady, and as he began to speak, the village seemed to quiet, as if the very air was listening. He told a story of the old days, when the village was young and the oak tree had just been planted. It was a tale of patience and growth, of how the villagers worked together to build the foundation of their home, and how the tree grew alongside them, its roots digging deep into the earth, just as the villagers' lives intertwined with one another. His words were like the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves overhead, soothing and full of life. As the story unfolded, the sky darkened, and the stars began to dot the sky like diamonds scattered across a velvet blanket. The lanterns hanging from the oak tree cast a soft, golden glow over the square, and the warmth of the gathering filled the night air. It was a moment of peace, of quiet joy, where time seemed to stretch and slow, allowing the villagers to savor the beauty of their shared lives. When Samuel's story came to an end, the square remained quiet for a moment, as if no one wanted to break the spell his words had cast. Then, slowly, the murmurs of conversation resumed, quieter now, more reflective. The children, sleepy from the day's play, began to curl up in their parents' laps or find a soft patch of grass to rest on. The adults, too, began to settle into the stillness of the evening, their voices low as they shared stories of their own lives, stories of family, of work, of the simple joys and struggles that wove their days together. Brenda sat quietly at the table, sipping her tea as she watched the scene around her. Her heart swelled with gratitude for this place, for these people, and for the life she had been blessed to live. She thought of her garden, of the rosemary and lavender that grew in abundance, and of the bees that hummed in the warmth of the sun. Life in Maplewood was not grand or filled with excitement, but it was rich in ways that truly mattered. It was a life of connection, of kindness, of the slow and steady rhythm that allowed for deep peace to take root. As the moon rose high above the village, casting a silver light over the square, the gathering began to wind down. Families gathered their belongings, bidding soft good nights to their neighbors as they made their way home. The air was cool now, but the warmth of the evening lingered in the hearts of those who had shared it. Brenda stood, her basket in hand, and looked around the square one last time before heading home. She saw Mary packing up her cinnamon rolls, Thomas helping to gather the empty cups, and Clara walking slowly toward her small cottage at the edge of the village. She saw Samuel still sitting beneath the oak tree, a soft smile on his face as he watched the stars. And she saw Michael chatting quietly with Peter, the tailor, as they walked together through the square. It was a night like so many before it, and so many to come. A night filled with quiet moments, with small acts of kindness, and with the deep, unspoken understanding that this was what life was truly about. The village gathering wasn't just a tradition. It was a reminder of the beauty that could be found in simplicity, in the gentle rhythm of life, and in the quiet joy of being together. As Brenda made her way home, the cobblestones beneath her feet felt cool, but the warmth of the evening clung to her heart. The soft rustling of leaves overhead and the occasional chirping of crickets were her only companions as she walked through the village streets, now bathed in moonlight. She glanced at the cottages she passed, each one dark and quiet, save for the gentle glow of a few flickering candles in the windows. Inside, the families of Maplewood were settling down for the night, their hearts full from the evening spent together. Her own cottage was a small, sturdy place nestled at the very edge of the village, where the woods began to grow thick. The roof was steep and thatched, with ivy curling up the stone walls. In the daytime, the cottage was surrounded by a vibrant garden, full of herbs and flowers, and beyond it, the forest stretched into the horizon, a peaceful and ever-present neighbor. Tonight, the garden was quiet, the only sounds the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Brenda entered her home, greeted by the warm, flickering light of the fire still burning low in the hearth. she set her basket down on the old wooden table in the center of the room, the scent of rosemary bread still clinging to the air. The room was small but cozy, filled with well-loved furniture and trinkets collected over a lifetime. A pair of knitting needles rested on the arm of her favorite chair by the fire, and on the mantel above the hearth sat a row of small glass jars filled with herbs from her garden, each carefully labeled in her delicate handwriting. She moved slowly, taking her time as she put away the leftover bread and honey. There was no need to hurry here, no reason to rush. Maplewood had a way of slowing time, of making even the simplest tasks feel meaningful. As she tidied up, she thought again of the gathering, of the familiar faces she had known for so long, and of the new ones who had joined the village in recent years. Each person added something special to Maplewood, just as each gathering brought its own moments of joy and connection. Brenda made herself a cup of herbal tea, the scent of mint and chamomile filling the air, and settled into her rocking chair by the fire. The chair creaked softly as she rocked back and forth, the rhythmic motion soothing and familiar. She sipped her tea slowly, her mind drifting over the memories of the evening. She could still hear the laughter of the children, the soft murmur of voices, and the gentle rustling of the oak tree's leaves in the breeze. The fire crackled quietly beside her, its warmth wrapping around her like a blanket. Her thoughts turned to Samuel and his story. It had been a beautiful one tonight, a tale of the village's early days and the planting of the great oak tree that now stood as the heart of their gatherings. Brenda smiled as she remembered the way Samuel's voice had carried through the square, soft but strong, weaving together the history of the village with the quiet strength of its people. It was a story she had heard many times before, but it never failed to bring her comfort. As she rocked gently in her chair, her eyelids grew heavy. The fire flickered softly, the shadows on the walls dancing in time with the flames. Outside, the moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver light over the village and the surrounding fields. Brenda's thoughts began to slow, her mind easing into the peaceful quiet of the night. The village of Maplewood, with its gentle rhythms and deep-rooted connections, was a place where one could truly rest, where the cares of the world seemed distant and far away. Before long, Brenda's breathing grew deep and even, her cup of tea forgotten on the small table beside her. She had drifted off to sleep in her chair, the warmth of the fire and the memory of the evening's gathering lulling her into peaceful slumber. And in the quiet of her cottage, with the night stretching on around her, Brenda dreamed of the village she loved so dearly, the cobbled streets, the gardens full of life, and the people who made Maplewood more than just a place, but a home. Thank you for joining us on Story Planet. If you felt like you stepped right into the village, shared stories with the neighbors, and could almost feel the cool breeze under the old oak tree, consider giving a thumbs up. And if this story made you feel part of the village's heart, feel free to share it with friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe for daily stories from Story Planet, offering peaceful escapes every day. Wishing you a peaceful night and a relaxed sleep. Sweet dreams.